How's it going, everybody? And welcome to episode 343 of Master My Garden Podcasts. Now, this week's episode being the last Friday of July, it's a seed sowing guide for the month of August, which starts tomorrow. And wow, the year just seems to be moving at such an unbelievable pace. It's hard to believe that we're up to, August now at this stage. And yeah, really, I don't know, the last couple of months just seem to be flying by. And the seed sowing guide is definitely getting smaller. The workload in terms of the garden is, in terms of the edible garden for sure, is reducing. And this month there's kind of it's a lot reduced. While July we talked about, the importance of July because it can get a little bit written off, a little bit forgotten. August is one that, the wind down is definitely on. Albeit that there is some still good and essential seeds to be sowing this month. So before we get into it, I mentioned for this week's sponsor, it's Seeds Ireland. So Seed Sowing Guide sponsored by Seeds Ireland, which is, a nice connection there. And Seeds Ireland is an Irish company who have five-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot. They have a big selection of seeds, all the different types of flowers, fruits, or flowers, vegetables, herbs, lots of sundries, microgreens, all of that sort of thing. Personally, from use of the seeds, really high germination rates, really good quality seed, fast delivery. Mentioned that before as well. So that's something. If you forget something and you need to get it quickly, that's a good one. So yeah, big selection, growing all the time, fast germination rates, and five-star reviews. So really, really worth checking out. So Seeds Ireland, I'll put the link in the show notes. But for now, we'll get into this month's sowing guide. And as I said, it's a greatly reduced list. So May kind of being the crescendo in terms of what we can sow, in terms of the amounts or the number of varieties of vegetables and fruits and flowers that we can sow. But now you're looking at, a kind of a reduced list, and we do still have our eye into autumn and winter. So the usual suspects are on it. So we still have our spring onion there, constant on it. Mentioned spring onion last week on our 10 essential vegetables to grow. And yeah, it's one that will kind of be on the list at any time that we are doing sowing. At this stage of the year, you can kind of increase the number. So if you grow to on a monthly basis to sort of have crops for, the 6 weeks time and for a period of about a month in terms of harvest. From in August, you can kind of sow a little bit more because they're not going to be bolting or growing, going to seed anywhere near as quickly. So that's the first thing. Um, so that's, as I say, on the list every month. You can also start switching to, your overwintering spring onions as we get into end of the month or into early next month. So you'll be switching away from, say, your white Lisbon to more of your Japanese bunching styles in the over the next month, towards the end of August and into September. Next one on the list is lettuce, and again here now we're switching to more the loose type lettuce. So your icebergs, etc., that form a really tight head, they don't tend to form at this stage of the year. There's not enough time for them. But you can still definitely sow, all the loose head lettuce, all the butterheads, your Rosses, your, oak leaf, any of those type lettuce, the looser type leaves, you can definitely sow at this stage. Spinach is another one. Again, you may start to switch your varieties. So, um, if you've been grown, for example, Amazon over the summer period, you might start switching at the end of August to, some of the overwintering ones, and that'll just mean that they'll sort of not run to seed, and they won't be running to seed as quickly anyway. Hopefully over the next month as temperatures sort of stabilize and come down through end of August and into September. So spinach is another one can definitely sow this month. Radish still on the list. They're just so fast. You're going to have a harvest within a couple of weeks, so they're really, really worthwhile. Another one on the list, you either love them or hate them. It's the turnip. So your little small turnips like the Milan purple tops or your snowball type turnips. Don't love them myself. I do grow them occasionally throughout the year. I haven't grown them yet this year, so I may well, because there's not much else that you'll be or growing, sowing at this stage. So I might sow them over the coming weeks. Next one on the list is cabbages. And at this stage, you're going to be sowing sort of overwintering cabbages, and they can be planted outside, so they'll need a bit of protection, but you can sow them now in your greenhouse, in your module trays, then transplant them outside and they will overwinter. And then next spring, hopefully, you'll have nice early spring cabbage from them. And that can be a lovely welcome crop in the earlier part of the year. Depends on weather and so on, but they will need protection. Particularly here, pigeons will be the one that will love them at that time of the year. So they'll need a bit of protection. Um, in terms of sowing, you wouldn't sow, say, the likes of your overwintering vegetables, but you may well the likes of red cabbage, purple sprout and broccoli, etc. But if you haven't got them planted or sowed, then you could get the plug plants and still get them in at this stage, and you'd still get a crop at some stage over the winter, depending on growth cycles and so on. Autumn salads, these are really important ones now as we start to transition in away from our summer salads. Now we still have a little bit of life in our summer salads, your spinach and so on, but we are transitioning, as we say at this stage, to autumn ones. So we're looking at rocket, some of the lettuce leaves that I mentioned, mustard, wintercress, tatsai, pak choi, endive, mustard. I think I mentioned that already. So they're kind of good ones, and they'll hold for a long period of time. They'll grow, relatively quickly. You'll get harvest over the winter. Now they all tend to be, a spicier type of taste than what you'll get from your summer salads. But it's a nice, to have a salad at that stage of the year. For growing indoors in your polytunnel, the likes of chard can still be sowed, and they're a really good crop, brilliant crop for winter salads and for stir fries and so on. Kale is another one you can grow in your polytunnel because the temperatures are coming down. Um, Good few of the herbs can still be grown, so your coriander, dill, chervil, parsley, pretty much a lot of the herbs can be sowed at this stage. You won't need your basils and so on. You'll be harvesting at the moment. There's no need probably to do another sowing there. So all of those herbs are still useful. And yeah, that's kind of it. So I'll just shoot over them again. So salad leaves, your lettuce in the loose head form, they're the normal summer ones. We still can sow those. They won't form heads, just loose leaves that we'll be harvesting. But with any of these, we can increase the amount that we sow. So if you're typically sowing, six or so lettuce plants, you can increase that now because they're not going to be running to seed as quickly. I know it's still quite warm, but you know, things are slowing down in terms of growth, so that'll help. Spinach is another one. Again, increase your sowings of those. Your autumn salads, again, rocket lettuce, mustard, tatsai, pak choi, endive, wintercress, herbs, coriander, dill, chervil, parsley, any of those really can be sowed. Radish, turnip. I'll probably still do another sowing of beetroot in the tunnel. Ideally, it's like no, you're not going to get a recommendation for going that journey, but I'm going to try it. If I don't get bulbs, I'll definitely get a leaf harvest, which will be good. And then kale and chard are two other ones. So you can see it's a very, very small list this month. We are transitioning in terms of the ornamental garden. A huge amount of our perennials can be sowed now, and yeah, I mentioned we'll come back on the perennial grow along, set up something properly on that. But a lot of our echinaceas, our verbenas, achilleas, rudbeckias, all of those type of perennial plants, foxgloves, I know they're biennials, but all of those can be sowed now in the month of August, and they'll be germinate, they'll grow, we'll pot them on later in the year, and then going into next year, you'll have plants that'll flower and fill up our beds. I had a success story from somebody that took part in the grow along last year, who filled a flower bed with seeds that were germinated. And yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But there's loads of flowers that we can be sowed as well. So it's quite a decent list, but it is certainly reducing, and it will reduce further as we go into September. Other thing that we can do at the end of this month, it's not seeds as in the small seeds, but late in the month, if anyone wants to grow potatoes for Christmas, you can, certain garden centres will stock Christmas potatoes. That's what they're called. Essentially, what they are is they're early varieties that have been remained in cold storage somewhere from last winter, and now they get planted, and they act like your early potatoes that you would normally plant in the spring. So basically, because the temperatures are high, they'll grow really, really quickly. You do have to be vigilant with them with blight, because typically speaking, earlies that are planted in the spring, they're out of the ground before blight becomes a problem. So you never really get that issue with them. But at this stage of the year, they are quite vulnerable to that. So you're planting for Christmas, and you are, hoping to have a harvest of new potatoes essentially for Christmas. So it's a lovely idea, and it does work. Um, Very few places do them, but if you are, and there's kind of limited amounts of them available. So if you are of a mind to do that towards the end of the month, then get yourself set up. They're better to grow at this stage of the year. Well, not better. It's important to grow them at this stage of the year in containers, because at the start of the year with your early potatoes, if you plant them in containers, typically what you're doing is you're looking to get them started inside, like in your polytunnel. And as we get further through the year and frost pass and so on, then we can move those containers outside to allow them to reach maturity outside. But with the Christmas ones, we're kind of doing that in reverse. So we're starting them outside because the temperatures are quite warm. They're easier to mind outside. Do have to be vigilant of blight, as I said. But then, as we get to the October, November, and maybe our first frosts are coming, first frost of the winter, then our containers need to go inside to protect them. So it's kind of a reverse in terms of container growing, but it does work, and it will ensure that you would have a nice harvest of new potatoes for Christmas. And yeah, that would be nice for Christmas dinner. Um, Other things to be doing in this month. So while it is a quieter month on the seed sowing front, we're still, our tomatoes, for example, we're doing weekly deep waters there. Um, don't water them every day, just once a week. If they're in containers, you have to keep an eye on them more than once a week. But for me, they're growing in the ground, so I do a deep watering once a week there. I don't touch them then other than that. So on the day that I do the watering, I'll do my stringing up a little bit, um, do my harvest, take off any leaves that are not useful anymore at the bottom, yellowing leaves and so on. Be vigilant for diseases, keep your ventilation right. Yeah, and just keep an eye on those. So that's kind of one of the things. The other thing that'll be happening this month is that a lot of us will either have just taken out our onion and garlic harvest, or we will be just about to do that. And that's what I'm saying to you, with the likes of your purple sprout and broccolis, your Savoy cabbages, and so on. If you don't have your sowings done of those, then get yourself a few plants and replace, when your onions or your garlic come out, just get those in there because you have the space, just utilize it. So that's another thing that's happening. The other thing to keep watching for is, weeds, any type of weeds popping up in your beds, especially again after you've taken out your onion harvest. For example, there might be a few little weeds here and there within the bed. Give it a light hoe, cover it with a little bit of compost or a little bit of fresh grass clippings, and then go back in with your next crop. And you're automatically getting your beds utilized and availing of all that space that's available to you. Pests this month, pests and diseases this month is, you have to be hyper vigilant. I have quite a lot of caterpillars. I didn't net. I chose not to net. and I have quite a few caterpillars on some brassicas, and yeah, I've been kind of removing those. They have done a bit of damage and quite quickly, but yeah, that's something that's also you need to be vigilant on this month as well. Um, Slugs are not really a problem at the moment. It has been so dry over such a long period, but as soon as the wet comes back, then slugs will become a problem again. Watching out for things like potato blight, still again hasn't been the worst because we've had that long dry period, but can come back and still become a problem at some stage. So they're all the kind of things that we're watching out for. But it's a less pressurized month than say the likes of May and June, and harvests are should be in full flow at this stage. So it's a nice month as well, and it's as I said, the seed sowing guide is much reduced, and it will reduce again further next month. Hopefully next month we'll be able to tie it in a little bit more with the perennial sowing, because that's such an easy win is the perennial sowing. You can sow seeds at this stage of the year and then produce really good, healthy plants to fill your borders next year without a huge amount of effort. And yeah, really easy to do and really rewarding. It also probably is, creating more resilient plants that are grown on your site, that are suitable to your site, that are accustomed to your site. So when you plant them in, then they kind of thrive. So yeah, that's something to look forward to next month in terms of seed sowing. But for now, that is the seed sowing guide for August. Quite a small one, as I said, but a really important one. And again, thanks to this month or this week's sponsor, and it's Seeds Ireland. So again, a nice tie-in there with our seed sowing guide. Link to Seeds Ireland is in the show notes, and that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll tell you next time. Happy gardening.